Most people think productivity is about time. They believe the key to getting more done is learning how to organize the day better, wake up earlier, or move faster. But in Hyperfocus, Chris Bailey makes a more powerful argument. The real currency of productivity is not time. It is attention. This idea changes everything. Time passes no matter what. Everyone gets the same 24 hours in a day. But attention is different. Attention can be directed, scattered, wasted, protected, trained, or stolen. It determines what you notice, what you work on, how deeply you think, and how much meaning you bring to each moment. In that sense, your life is shaped not just by how you spend your hours, but by what receives your focus inside those hours. Bailey argues that we live in an age where attention is constantly under attack. Phones buzz, tabs multiply, messages arrive, social feeds refresh, and our minds are pulled in 100 directions at once. As a result, many people are busy all day without ever reaching deep concentration. They work, but they work in fragments. They think, but they think in interruptions. They move from task to task, never staying with one thing long enough to do their best work. That is the core problem this book addresses. Hyperfocus is about reclaiming control over attention so you can work with depth, think more clearly, and live more intentionally. Bailey explains that when you manage your attention well, you do not just become more productive. You become more present. Work improves, creativity improves, and even ordinary experiences become richer. This is a crucial point because many people have accepted distraction as normal. They assume multitasking is necessary, constant responsiveness is responsible, and partial attention is just part of modern life. But Bailey challenges that assumption. He shows that the mind does its best work when it is concentrated, deliberate, and fully engaged. The book begins by treating attention as something precious. Just as money should be spent carefully, attention should be directed intentionally. When you waste attention on shallow distractions, you weaken the quality of your work and the quality of your day. But when you invest attention in meaningful tasks, relationships, and ideas, the return is enormous. For anyone building a business, studying, creating content, writing, or simply trying to live with more clarity, this message is essential. The first step toward better productivity is not cramming more into the day. It is asking where your attention is going and whether it is going there on purpose. This opening lesson sets the tone for the entire book. Hyperfocus is not just about doing more. It is about doing what matters with deeper concentration. It is about recognizing that attention is finite, powerful, and worth protecting. Once you understand that, you stop treating distraction like a small inconvenience. You start seeing it as one of the biggest hidden costs in modern life. The central idea of the book is captured in its title. Hyperfocus is the state of directing your attention completely toward one task. It means choosing a single meaningful target and giving it your full mental energy without allowing unrelated distractions to enter. This is not the same as simply being busy or concentrating for a few scattered minutes. Hyperfocus is deep, deliberate, and intentional. It happens when your attention is fully anchored to the task in front of you. You are not checking messages in between. You are not switching tabs every few minutes. You are not mentally dividing your energy between 5 different concerns. You are all in. Bailey explains that the brain has limited attentional space. At any given moment, only a small number of things can fit into conscious awareness. When that space is filled with one important task, performance improves. But when it becomes crowded with notifications, worries, background thoughts, and competing priorities, the quality of your work drops. This is why multitasking is so damaging. Most of what people call multitasking is really task switching. They are not doing many things at once well. They are rapidly jumping between tasks, losing time and mental energy every time they switch. The brain has to reorient itself again and again. That creates friction, errors, fatigue, and shallower thinking. Hyperfocus solves that problem by narrowing the field. Instead of spreading attention across many things, you concentrated on one. This focused mode is especially valuable for cognitively demanding work like writing, studying, solving problems, planning, editing, designing, or making important decisions. These tasks need depth, not fragmentation. The book also emphasizes that hyperfocus is not automatic. It has to be created. You usually enter it by eliminating distractions, defining the task clearly, and staying with it long enough for concentration to deepen. At first, the mind may resist. It may crave novelty, stimulation, or easy escape. But if you remain with the task, attention becomes more stable. This is one of the most useful ideas in the book. Focus often feels hard at the beginning, not because the task is impossible, but because your brain is adjusting from scattered mode to concentrated mode. Many people give up too early. They interpret initial resistance as a sign that they cannot focus. But Bailey shows that deep concentration often comes after you move through that early restlessness. Hyperfocus is powerful because it improves both efficiency and quality. You not only get more done, you do better work. You make fewer mistakes. You understand problems more deeply. You become more immersed in the process. And perhaps most importantly, you feel a stronger sense of satisfaction because your mind is not constantly being pulled apart. In a distracted world, the ability to hyperfocus is a serious advantage. It is a skill that separates shallow effort from meaningful progress. The more you can deliberately enter this state, the more control you gain over your work and your life. One of the most valuable parts of hyperfocus is the way it explains the true cost of distraction. Most distractions seem harmless in the moment. A quick glance at your phone, a brief check of email, one notification, one short scroll, one small interruption. Each one appears minor. But Bailey shows that the real cost is much larger than it looks. When you are interrupted, you do not just lose the few seconds spent on the distraction itself. You also lose the mental momentum you had built. Your brain has to pull away from the original task, process the new input, and then find its way back. That return is not instant. Some part of your attention remains stuck on what interrupted you, even after you try to resume. This is why task switching is so draining. Every switch creates cognitive residue. A piece of your mind lingers behind. When this happens repeatedly throughout the day, focus becomes fragmented. Work stretches longer than necessary. Mistakes increase. Stress rises because you feel constantly active but strangely unproductive. Bailey argues that distraction is expensive not just because it wastes time, but because it lowers the quality of thought. Deep ideas need continuity. Good writing needs immersion. Solving difficult problems requires staying mentally connected to the issue long enough for insight to develop. But frequent interruptions break that continuity before your thinking can mature. This helps explain why so many people end the day exhausted without feeling accomplished. It is not always because they lacked effort. Often, it is because their attention was divided into tiny pieces. They never had enough uninterrupted time to move into deeper work. The book also challenges the modern habit of constant availability. Many workplaces and digital environments reward fast responses, but rapid responsiveness often comes at the cost of meaningful progress. A person can look efficient because they reply instantly, yet accomplish little of real importance because their mind is never allowed to settle. Another subtle cost of distraction is emotional. When your attention is repeatedly hijacked, you feel less in control. The day starts to feel reactive. Instead of choosing what matters, you keep responding to whatever appears next. That can create a background sense of anxiety, as if your mind belongs more to incoming demands than to your own intentions. Bailey's message here is simple but powerful. Distraction is not neutral. It is not just a small inconvenience. It is a force that quietly reduces the quality of your work, your thinking, and your experience of the day. For viewers, this section offers a major wake-up call. Stop judging distraction by how little time it seems to take. Judge it by how much attention it breaks. Once you understand that, protecting focus stops feeling optional. It becomes a necessary condition for doing meaningful work well. The lesson is clear. If you want better output, better clarity, and less mental fatigue, you cannot treat interruptions casually. You have to see them for what they are: silent destroyers of depth. Chris Bailey does not treat focus as something mysterious. He treats it as something that can be designed. If you want to hyperfocus more often, you need to create the right conditions for concentration. One of the first steps is deciding what deserves your attention. Focus becomes much easier when the target is clear. If you sit down with a vague intention like work on project, your mind has too many escape routes. But if the task is specific, such as outline the next video, write the first page, revise section 2, or solve one key problem, the brain has a defined path. Clarity matters because attention follows direction. The more precisely you define the work, the easier it becomes to start and stay engaged. The next step is removing distractions before they interrupt you. This means silencing notifications, closing unnecessary tabs, putting your phone out of reach, and creating an environment with as little friction as possible. Bailey makes it clear that focus is not only about self-control. It is also about environment. If temptations are always visible and accessible, concentration becomes harder than it needs to be. He also emphasizes the importance of working on one thing at a time. This sounds simple, but it is one of the most difficult habits to maintain in modern life. The mind loves novelty. It looks for excuses to switch, especially when the current task becomes difficult. That is why protecting a single point of focus is so important. Another powerful idea is matching your level of focus to the importance of the task. Not every task requires deep concentration. Some things are routine and can be done with lighter attention. But high-value work deserves your best mental state. You do not need to hyperfocus on everything. You need to hyperfocus on the right things. Bailey also points out that energy affects attention. It is much easier to concentrate when you are rested, fed, and mentally fresh. If your energy is low, the brain becomes more vulnerable to distraction. This means the quality of your focus is shaped not just by your willpower, but by sleep, breaks, nutrition, and the timing of your work. There is also value in working in blocks. When you know you are focusing for a defined period, the mind can settle more easily. You are not committing forever. You are simply committing for this block. That makes concentration feel more manageable. The overall message is encouraging. Deep concentration does not require a perfect personality. It requires better conditions. When you define the task clearly, reduce distractions, protect one thing at a time, and work with your energy instead of against it, focus becomes far more natural. For content creators and knowledge workers, this lesson is incredibly useful. Great work rarely comes from scattered attention. It comes from carefully built conditions that allow the mind to stay with something important long enough to do it well. In short, hyperfocus is not something you wait for. It is something you prepare for. One of the most interesting ideas in hyperfocus is that intense concentration is only half of the picture. The other half is what Chris Bailey calls scatterfocus. This is the mode where the mind is allowed to wander more freely. At first, that may sound like the opposite of productivity. But Bailey argues that it is actually essential. When your mind wanders in the right way, it connects ideas, processes experiences, solves background problems, and generates creative insights. This is why people often get good ideas in the shower, while walking, during travel, or when doing something repetitive. The brain is still working, but in a looser and more associative way. Scatterfocus matters because the mind cannot stay in intense concentration forever. Hyperfocus is powerful, but it is also demanding. If you try to force deep concentration all day long, attention weakens and fatigue rises. The brain needs variation. It needs periods of directed focus and periods of open mental space. This is where many people go wrong. They assume productivity means constant mental effort. So whenever they have a free moment, they immediately fill it with stimulation. They check their phone while waiting in line, listen to something nonstop, scroll during breaks, and avoid silence at all costs. But by doing that, they eliminate the very spaces where reflection and creativity often appear. Bailey makes the case that boredom can actually be useful. When the mind is not being bombarded with input, it starts to think more deeply. It reviews unresolved issues. It makes unexpected connections. It processes what matters. In other words, mental wandering is not always a failure of focus. Sometimes it is part of how the brain works best. Scatterfocus is especially important for creative work and decision-making. If you have been thinking hard about a problem, stepping away can help. The conscious mind pauses, but the unconscious mind continues working. Later, the answer may emerge with surprising clarity. This idea also adds balance to the book. Hyperfocus teaches you how to concentrate deeply. Scatterfocus teaches you how to create the mental openness that supports insight. Both are necessary. Focus without reflection can become rigid. Reflection without focus can become aimless. Together, they create a fuller and smarter way of working. For viewers, this lesson is valuable because it removes guilt from certain forms of rest. Taking a walk, sitting in silence, staring out a window, or letting your mind wander for a while is not always wasted time. It can be part of the thinking process. The key is intention. Mindless distraction drains you. Deliberate mental space restores you. One scatters attention in a shallow way. The other opens attention in a meaningful way. This may be one of the most surprising insights in the whole book. Sometimes the path to better focus is not more input. It is less. Sometimes your best idea does not come while pushing harder. It comes while giving your mind room to breathe. Hyperfocus makes it clear that concentration is not just a mental decision. It is heavily influenced by energy and environment. If your body is tired, your brain becomes restless. If your environment is noisy, cluttered, and full of interruptions, attention becomes unstable. That means protecting focus requires more than motivation. It requires support. Bailey points out that the quality of your attention changes throughout the day. There are times when you feel sharp, alert, and mentally powerful. There are other times when you feel foggy, distracted, or easily pulled away. Many people ignore these patterns and expect themselves to perform equally well at all hours. But that is unrealistic. A better strategy is to notice when your energy peaks and use those windows for your most important work. When you are mentally fresh, deep tasks become easier. When you are drained, even simple tasks can feel hard. This does not mean every day will be perfect. It means awareness helps you make better decisions about where to place your highest value work. The book also emphasizes rest. Breaks are not signs of weakness. They are part of sustaining concentration. After periods of deep work, the brain needs recovery. Without breaks, attention degrades. With breaks, focus can renew. Environment matters just as much. A workspace full of visual clutter, active notifications, open tabs, and constant noise quietly weakens the mind. Even if you do not consciously notice each distraction, part of your attention is still being pulled. This is why simplifying the environment can produce immediate benefits. Bailey's advice suggests that if you want stronger focus, you should reduce what competes for it. Keep your workspace cleaner. Limit digital temptations. Make it easier to do the right thing and harder to drift into distraction. The goal is not perfection. The goal is to lower friction for concentration. There is also an important lesson here about self-compassion. Sometimes people assume poor focus is a character flaw. They label themselves lazy, undisciplined, or mentally weak. But often the problem is less personal than they think. Maybe they are sleep-deprived. Maybe they are overstimulated. Maybe their environment is constantly interrupting them. Maybe they have never built a system that supports attention. That perspective is helpful because it leads to better solutions. Instead of only blaming yourself, you start improving the conditions around you. You sleep better, structure breaks, protect your best hours, and simplify your workspace. These changes often do more for focus than harsh self-criticism ever could. For anyone trying to produce better work consistently, this is a crucial message. Attention is not separate from the rest of your life. It reflects how you live, how you rest, and what your environment is asking your mind to process. Manage your energy. Protect your environment. Respect your limits. The stronger those foundations become, the easier hyperfocus will feel. Another major strength of hyperfocus is the way it forces readers to think about what deserves attention in the first place. Focus is powerful, but it is only useful if it is aimed at the right target. You can spend hours concentrating and still waste time if you are focusing on work that does not matter. Bailey makes an important distinction between activity and value. Many people fill their days with tasks that make them feel productive without actually creating meaningful results. They respond to messages, organize files, attend unnecessary meetings, tweak minor details, and constantly stay in motion. This creates the feeling of busyness, but not always progress. Meaningful work is different. It is work that contributes to important goals. It creates value. It moves something forward. It often requires more thought, more discomfort, and more concentration than shallow tasks. That is why people often avoid it. Shallow work is easier, more immediate, and often socially rewarded. Deep work is harder, slower, and usually less visible in the short term. This insight is especially important for people who work online or in creative fields. It is easy to confuse visible activity with real output. You can answer messages all day and feel responsible, yet make no progress on the work that would truly matter. You can spend hours tweaking small details instead of creating the core thing that actually moves your project ahead. Hyperfocus encourages readers to step back and ask better questions. What work has the highest value? What deserves my freshest attention? What am I doing because it matters? And what am I doing because it is easy, urgent, or socially expected? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are necessary. Attention is limited. Every hour spent on low-value work is an hour unavailable for meaningful work. If you do not actively choose where focus goes, the day will fill with whatever shouts the loudest. This section of the book also connects productivity to courage. Often, the most important work is the work that requires the most vulnerability. Writing the chapter, making the video, launching the project, solving the hard problem, starting the thing you have delayed. These tasks matter, but they also expose you to uncertainty. That is one reason shallow tasks are so tempting. They let you feel busy without facing the deeper challenge. Bailey's message is that true productivity is not about maximizing motion. It is about maximizing meaningful attention. It is about directing your best focus toward what matters most, even when easier tasks are calling for you. For viewers, this may be one of the most practical lessons in the book. Before trying to focus harder, ask whether the task in front of you deserves that focus. The right target matters just as much as the quality of concentration. In the end, busyness can be a mask. Meaningful work requires clarity, courage, and depth. Hyperfocus helps you build all three. By the end of Hyperfocus, Chris Bailey leaves readers with a deeper understanding of attention than most productivity books offer. This is not just a book about concentration techniques. It is a book about how attention shapes the quality of your work, your creativity, and your life. The ability to hyperfocus gives you depth. It allows you to stay with important tasks long enough to do them well. It helps you think clearly, create better work, and resist the constant pull of distraction. In a world built for interruption, this ability becomes a serious advantage. The ability to scatter focus gives you openness. It gives your mind space to connect ideas, recover from effort, and generate insights that do not appear under pressure. This matters because great work is not created by effort alone. It also needs reflection, incubation, and mental breathing room. Together, these two modes create a healthier and more intelligent way to work. You focus deeply when it matters. You step back when your mind needs space. You stop expecting constant intensity from yourself. You begin respecting how attention actually functions. There is also a broader life lesson here. What you pay attention to determines the texture of your days. If your attention is constantly fragmented, life begins to feel fragmented too. You may always be stimulated, but rarely satisfied. Always connected, but rarely present. Always active, but rarely immersed. But when attention becomes intentional, life changes. Work becomes more meaningful because you are fully there. Conversations become richer because you are actually listening. Rest becomes more restorative because your mind is not split in every direction. Even small moments become more vivid because you are no longer half absent from your own experience. This is why hyperfocus matters beyond productivity. It reminds us that attention is one of our most valuable human abilities. It is the gateway through which we experience everything. To lose control of attention is to lose some control over life itself. To reclaim attention is to reclaim presence, clarity, and direction. For anyone trying to do meaningful work in a distracted age, the message is simple. Protect your attention. Focus on the right things. Give your mind space to wander well. Build your environment around depth instead of impulse. Respect both concentration and recovery. The final lesson of the book is not that you need to become perfect. It is that better attention leads to a better life. You do not need to focus deeply every hour of every day. You simply need to become more deliberate about what receives your mind. Hyperfocus shows that real productivity is not about cramming more into your schedule. It is about bringing more of yourself to what matters. And that may be one of the most important skills anyone can build today.